Okay, so hi, my name is Dr. Shaan from Vitality Chiropractic. Welcome back to our interview series where I'll be talking with other healthcare professionals more about their stories, how they got started, and of course, the people that they help. Today, our guest is Andrew, and he's a physiotherapist working here in Singapore. Andrew, how are things going?
Hi, how are you?
Yeah,
I'm
not too
good.
bad, not too bad. I understand you're still at work at the moment?
Yes, just seeing about one a day or twice a day. That's all.
Okay, so kind of more limited in time now. So, so for people who've never been to see a physiotherapist before, how would you explain physiotherapy to them?
Well, physiotherapy encompasses a lot of things. Basically, we're just trying to help out people without medication, be it whether they are from a musculoskeletal problem or a cardiothoracic problem, meaning a lot of respiratory problems, as well as neurological problems. I choose to work more with the musculoskeletal area. So, very much like you actually, in treatment from a musculoskeletal standpoint.
Mine's actually a bit different. I don't really see much musculoskeletal back pain or anything. It's more neurological on that side. But if we start, pardon, sorry. As if we start from the beginning, then what made you decide you wanted to become a physiotherapist?
Okay, it actually started many years ago, of course, all of us. For me, I was actually studying in Singapore University. I was actually doing computer technology at that time. This was way back 1990. And I was studying computer technology. And before that, I've always wanted to be in the health line. Uh, Unfortunately, I couldn't get in because of my grades. And so I went in to do computer technology for a year. And after struggling with it for a year, I felt that that wasn't me. And it was a personal story. I felt that I needed something more to help me, but I didn't know what to do. But I've always wanted to be in the health line, like maybe doctor or something like that. And what happened was that I prayed a lot. Um, I'm a Catholic, so I prayed a lot, and every day I would just be praying for direction. And initially, it just I it was several months, and slowly I felt that there was a word. For instance, if you see a word document and you can't see the word, it's really fine. That was how it felt like in my heart, and slowly it became stronger and stronger. Like the word became bigger and bigger, and way back at that time, 1990, that was almost like 30 years ago. I couldn't we didn't even understand what physiotherapy was. So when I got the word, it was like, what's that? That was really strange. And so I felt that it was a calling from God, but it was also something that I didn't know what to do. It's not established patients like lawyers, doctors, teachers, firemen even. It was something that really different. So I actually had to search it out, go to the hospitals, and find out what it is all about before I could even feel comfortable with it. And after discovering that, I actually wrote into hospitals. I found comfort with it. I actually felt easy at it. And eventually, I told my dad about it. He was really disappointed because at that point in time, 1990, IT was at the forefront of things. Before Facebook, before Word even, IT was at the forefront of things. I was actually going to be doing all those things. But unfortunately, I chose or wanted to do this. And I've never looked back since. I still enjoy doing my work. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting you said that. Actually, my dad used to work in IT. Like he took a break from one career and went into another, I guess around the mid 90s, working for companies like Prudential and things. Again, it was way before Facebook or some of the big fintechs came in as well.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before about musculoskeletal issues. Is this the main thing that you see for your patients, or what do your patients commonly present with when they come to see you?
Mainly now, musculoskeletal. I do see a few chest therapy patients, those who have, asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia, where they've got a lot of water in their lungs. And so we have to do techniques of chest physiotherapy to actually help them to, bring out these secretions or phlegm from their lungs. I've got colleagues who are working in the hospitals. They are doing chest therapy. and that's their job all day long. In fact, now with COVID, they are in ICUs all the time. So they're also in the forefront and the front line of things, which is really scary. But I didn't choose to do chest physiotherapy as my main thing. So musculoskeletal is the main thing that I do. So typically people with neck headaches, back pain, you know, elbow injuries, ankle injuries, post-surgical issues, those will be the patients that I see nowadays.
And what was it that drew you more towards this line? Because I know, especially within physiotherapy, there's all ranges of even working with people with strokes, people with, with cancer, even for certain types of palliative care. Why did you go more towards musculoskeletal? And for some of the people watching, could you explain a little bit about what musculoskeletal is? Because it may be a bit of a foreign term for some people.
Yes, musculoskeletal, as the term implies, has muscles, and skeletal, which is bones. So basically, I'm dealing with any problem resulting from muscles or bones. With muscles and bones, they can get injured even from as simple as even turning around in bed and injuring yourself accidentally. But commonly, they are from sports, as well as just as carrying a heavy load, or even sitting for too long in the office, or in front of a computer, hunching in front of a computer. So those are the problems often I see when they injure themselves. And the pain can result in numbing sensation as far as into the fingers or into the toes, as well as pain that is debilitating, they can't work anymore. Yeah. For me, when I choose to work on them, I could have chosen neurology, which is rehabilitation techniques for the people who have neurological problems like stroke or car injuries or head injuries. But it was not whether I wanted to choose musculoskeletal just because for fun. I chose it because I had the aptitude for it. I felt it came easy for me, more so than trying to do the neurological treatment or the chest therapy treatment. I've got similarly for my colleagues, and there's no good or bad. My colleagues, they choose to become chest therapists. Every day they're seeing patients who are really, really sick, and they're coming out with a lot of phlegm, green, pussy phlegm. Most people will be shunning away from it, especially during this period of time. But they found a big calling for it. I can't understand why, and nor can they understand me as well. But it's just a calling that we feel comfortable doing, and that's why I chose musculoskeletal treatment for my patients.
In terms of when somebody comes to see you, then what is the normal first time they come to see you? What does that kind of look like, that appointment?
What do you mean? I mean, like,
as in the structure of, say, somebody comes to see you, do you have, say, a certain pattern you follow? How would it be for someone who's never seen a physiotherapist?
Okay. Of course, they'll most of my patients come to me through recommendations, from word of mouth. So say for instance, if I've got a patient who have had a shoulder injury and they know of someone with a shoulder injury, they'll probably describe what they had gone through with a shoulder injury with me. And usually the patients will know. But typically, even if I get a patient who has not of any knowledge of what physiotherapy is, they will come in, of course, with a shoulder injury. They'll tell me, I do not know what you're doing. You tell me what I have to do for you. And that's usually what I'll go. I'll assess them properly. So if it's a shoulder injury, I'll assess the neck as well as the shoulder and the back to make sure that it's not coming from the neck or the back, but it's just typically a shoulder. The shoulder could have been an injury resulting from something that happened. Maybe they could be a badminton or tennis player and they could have served too hard or injured their shoulder through some injury. I have to determine all of that to actually help sort out what was the actual diagnosis.
In terms of then, say, going forward, I know, of course, every condition is different, but what would be, say, kind of a more typical approach for treatment?
My work, unlike a lot of other physiotherapists who rely quite a lot on modalities like electrical stimulation, heat therapy. I rely mainly on my hands. So just like a lot of chiropractors, I rely heavily on my hands. I would do a lot of deep tissue release, cross friction release on the ligaments, as well as restoring the muscles. Of course, only after that, then because it's always a pain and movement. A lot of physiotherapists also choose to go into the movement side, which is trying to move the arms from exercise. But it's a chicken and egg thing, pain and movement. Sometimes you can move, but sometimes it's too painful. So I choose to actually treat the pain and try to, from there, once the pain becomes easier, then we can actually get on with the movement. So by using the technique that I use with my hands, I would stretch out, move the joint, restore the muscle function, and that's where we can get the function of the, for instance, right now I'm talking about shoulder, you'll start to get better from there.
So you mentioned about function. For those patients, say, where they maybe have come in for a symptom, or maybe if someone comes in without symptoms, is it more about then kind of following the function or more about following the symptoms?
If they are functioning well, certainly I'll follow the symptom if they have symptoms like pain. But if the symptom is actually resulting in a loss of function, then certainly I need to work on the symptom first, the pain, and restore the function concurrently at the same time. So, but if they certainly do not have any symptom and it's just a loss of function through loss of muscle, and certainly I need to make sure that there's no neurological impingement of the nerves. The nerves are not, that means that the nerves are not being compromised so that there's no signal to the muscle. As long as I've ascertained that there's no problem like that, we can start going about rehabilitating, getting the muscles to start moving and getting it stronger. Of course, by rehabilitation, results can be as fast as within a week. In fact, sometimes if the correct movement is taught, they can actually have the proper pattern of movement as fast as within a day or two. And then the rest is just trying to get the muscles to get stronger. I remembered many years back, just as an anecdote, I had a patient who had nerve impingement in his T3. It was so bad that it created muscle wasting in his shoulder. And within 2 weeks, he lost his whole movement of his shoulder. It felt paralyzed. He couldn't even lift it up. His primary care doctor, his GP, was so scared, told him that he can't do anything about it anymore, literally chased him away and asked him to go and do something about it, find something. He didn't know who to refer it to. So when this client came to me, he couldn't move his arm and he was in a lot of pain. So certainly there was muscle impingement, there was a neurological problem as well as a lot of pain. So I had to deal with the pain first. I had to treat his neck, treat his thoracic area, restore, and at the same time, once he had his pain down, his arm was completely lifeless. It was as if he had completely paralyzed. It was quite scary because, and his whole muscle at the back of his shoulder was, pardon the noise, his whole shoulder was wasted away. There's just a whole scapula, which is the shoulder blade, left there. Sorry. Is it not? Hear that?
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened was that finally I got to train him to use his arms, and with the pattern, within 3 to 5 days, he managed to get certain movements coming in, which was really encouraging because it was scary for him that he couldn't move his arm forever. And finally, when we sorted that out, about within a month, he finally managed to get his whole arm control back. It wasn't perfect, wasn't able to throw things or lift up things, but he can certainly lift up his whole arm again. So it took a while, but yeah.
For your patients then, typically, because I know it's the same for us as chiropractors, there's nothing that happens instantly in the body. We're not made of plastic or metal, things take time. What would you say is kind of the normal kind of period between, say, someone coming to see you and then either them being, checked out of the clinic or them having a full resolution of what's going on with them?
It's a great question because I do see patients, and I'm sure probably yourself as well, with problems that resolve within as fast as just one session, and certain cases that may resolve even as long as 6 months or 9 months or a year. Had one patient that lasted 2.5 years. That was really long, and I was seeing her about 2-3 times a week. But prior to seeing me, she had a 10-12 years history of neck cervical spondylosis problem in her neck. Her MRI was, and in fact, this might be interesting for you as well. You probably see MRIs and X-rays, and sometimes you see a lot of degeneration. And oftentimes with our training, we often know that with degeneration, it's one-way road, right? It's always going to get worse. The most, we're just going to limit it. But we never really think that can it actually get better with, with osteoarthritis, with degeneration, especially when you have MRIs stating all of that clearly in your X-rays that there is degeneration, there's osteoarthritis, and there's osteoporosis. When she saw me, her first MRI report and X-ray was 3 pages long. I was like, wow, 3 pages of MRI report words. And that was done like 6 years prior to even seeing me. I didn't force her to do another MRI or X-ray, but I worked on her for about 2.5 years. Her work insurance policy was changing, and that meant that it was starting to get a little bit stricter. So we decided to do another final MRI before her insurance changed in her workplace. And the MRI was startling, actually. It was surprising for me. It became half a page. There was no more talk about arthritis, osteoarthritis. There was no spondylosis. It was just, pretty much about 4 sentences long. And I certainly urge you as well, to go for that if you can. But because a lot of us practitioners, especially if we don't travel with a journey with a patient for 2.5 years, 3 years, we only see them 2 months, 3 months. We don't get to see that, but we can certainly change them. So in going back to your reply, it can be a couple of days of resolution, or it can be up as long as 2.5 years. But usually I'll give them an indication. I'll give them an indication of 24 hours, what to expect, 48 hours, what to expect, and 72 hours, what to expect. If their resolution, they can get 70%, 80% better within 24 hours, the prognosis is really good. That means the outcome is really good. If they get better, even about 50, 60%, and it gets better and stays there for about 48 hours, and still maintains as much as that, that means that they are more, for me, in an average zone. You'll get better maybe after seeing me about 5-6 times over a period of about 2 months, you'll get a lot better and full resolution by that. The people who get after, or even if they get 90% better after the first session with me, but within 1 hour, the pain comes back bad as before they had seen me. I will usually advise them that this is a long-drawn problem and it will take a lot longer. Probably about anywhere between 12 to 15 sessions or more. So we are looking at anywhere between 3 months to 6 months of full resolution. So rarely do I see many of these cases now. I'm not sure whether, I hope that it's because my techniques have improved. But I do, maybe in about a year, I'll probably see 1 or 2 like that. But typically most fall within the average or to the better zone.
So I understand, of course, for yourself, you have a busy practice. You've been in practice for quite a long time. What do you think are some of the most important aspects of success in practice?
Honesty. just that word, honesty. In fact, most of my patients have developed a rapport and well reputation even because they'll tell their friends. So I've got patients that sometimes even spend the whole hour with me just talking without me doing anything, because they just need to get an honest opinion about their solution or what they plan to do. And even if they need to go for surgery, at least they are comforted and they are aware that that's the solution that they will do. But thankfully, usually most of my patients can be safe from even doing surgery. So there's no need. And that's where they treasure the opinion from me, the honesty. I don't go about trying to give them, unrealizable or solutions that are not practical. So the solutions, as long as patients know what they're I'm sure this is for everyone. If we know that we're going to die from cancer and we are prepared, we as long as we have an honest opinion, we know that we can prepare for it. But if someone tells us and gives us, all sorts of, whether frivolous or uh, hope that is not realizable, then we can keep on chasing the hope, but maybe we cannot actually realize it, and it becomes a disappointment after that. So I think the honesty is the most important. Yeah.
It's interesting actually you say about, say, as an example, cancer. I was talking with somebody last night who's a colleague, and he works a lot in research and especially on objective tests like, say, HRV and other tests to really see what's happening in the body. And one of the things that they found is, say, for someone who has a prognosis, they will run some of these tests to get an idea of what's actually happening in terms of how well the body adapts. And especially, say, like in Korea and other countries, they're actually then able to give a more realistic prognosis. So it's not necessarily that someone has, say, this type of cancer and this means this. It's they have this, but their body state is actually this. So it could be you should go home and spend more time with your family, or go to a hospice, or it really starts. So actually, it's interesting. Things are changing a lot.
Yes.
But I agree. It's difficult if it's not fitting what we think it would be in terms of our hope or even just our acceptance. Unfortunately, in those cases.
Exactly.
For yourself, then, what kind of goals do you have at the moment, either for your own practice or for physiotherapy as a profession within Singapore?
Two things actually. I think for physiotherapy, primarily, even though I've been doing this for 25 years, it was a lot harder way back then, where we find it very difficult for getting people, doctors, to actually know about physiotherapy. And even up till today, yeah, sure, we're getting a lot of referrals more from doctors, but they still don't really understand what physiotherapy does. And a lot of skeptical of what physiotherapy can do. Mainly, especially between these two words, relief and proper treatment. In their minds, a lot of doctors still think that physiotherapy is relief and not a treatment. And because this two distinction is really important, the doctors are not aware clearly that physiotherapy can have a very strong effect in the treatment program, and not just a relief to cure or help them from pain. So because of that, a lot of doctors still feel very skeptical in thinking that physiotherapy can work. So when they refer to physiotherapy, it's like a by the way thing. Let's do it this way. Let's try for a couple of months and see what works. If it works, good for you. If it doesn't, then come back to me, and then we'll think of perhaps a surgical solution. So unfortunately, that mindset, hopefully, maybe through this interview, and if there are doctors looking at this, it will help to understand that it is a treatment program. The other thing that I hope is that, sorry, it's flying.
That's okay. I can't hear it at this point. It's stopped now. It's okay.
Okay. The other thing that I hope is that there's a health program in school to help children, especially from secondary school or middle school onwards to understand what the body is. Because a lot of times, a lot of my patients come in, they might be really successful businessmen, but they're really scared of what's happening to their body, especially when something goes wrong. So I think a good program of health education to know, we've got sex education in school, but that's to prevent unwanted pregnancies. But for health program to actually understand the simple basic functioning of the body so that they're introduced to the body from a younger age. And if you have a simple program, maybe even a sprained ankle, they wouldn't panic and they would know what to do, especially the first couple of days. The rest, ice, and compression elevation, which is prevalent in all acute care, treatment of acute injuries. So they're not so scared. Whereas a lot of people will be panicking and they're not sure what to do. Yeah. So these two things are primarily to inform the doctors and to have an education for the children from a younger age.
In general, what kind of changes would you want to see, say, in healthcare? Not necessarily always related to our own professions, but even changes you think that could be beneficial in the healthcare system?
Certainly, okay. I'm in private, so I guess a lot more conversations between doctors, but sometimes we're so busy. But that's just a mixture of things. But for my colleagues in the hospitals, I think what can be done is a lot more integration between the healthcare from just, the physiotherapists in the hospital, where they can actually help out more into the community project. I know there are a lot of small projects going on out there, but I think a lot more can be done. But a lot of time is time from both, everybody actually. So.
Given the current lockdown, what are some pieces of advice or tips that you would give for people who are currently staying and working from home?
Actually, give me a moment. I actually saw. I actually shared on my Facebook the other day. If you don't mind, can I just read out this bit?
Sure. Yeah.
It was a quote from a lady called Kitty O'Meara. I'm not sure if you've heard it before. And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced. Some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently. And the people healed, and in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses, made new choices, and dreamed new images, and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. So that's my wish, and I think it was a great quote, reminder for all of us. But particularly for me, I would recommend people to keep fit still, because it's a great way of boosting up the immune system. I think a lot of articles have come out about that to boost up the immune system. So of course we do need to exercise to boost up, and of course as far as possible, eating well and nutritioning themselves well, and drink lots of water.
And before we end then today, just to kind of go a little bit further back, maybe a little bit more personal, if you could talk to yourself, say 10 years ago, what kind of advice would you want to give to yourself?
Okay, I'm not sure how far this will go out into the public, but I went through a personal disaster 10 years ago. I had a divorce. So I would tell people, certainly pick your partners well.
Yes, that's
but to talk to myself 10 years ago, and way before that even, that would be it as well. But certainly, you know, live for yourself as well. Enjoy life, and more importantly, learn to laugh, which kept me going. Laugh and pray. A lot of people would have been very depressed, and gone into a lot of emotional, psychological issues. And that's typical, quite normal. But I think learning to laugh, learning to enjoy life helps a lot. So, yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice for any time, for all people. It really is, especially if they're stuck at home with people right now. Thank you so much for joining me today, Andrew. And thank you everybody who's been watching this either live or watching on the replay. If you have any questions for Andrew, let me know and I'll make sure that he can contact you the right way. And if you have any questions for me, you can either put them in the comments, send us an email, or you can give me a call on 8438-9550. Andrew, thank you for joining me again.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shaan. Thank you for the time and the opportunity for this interview.
Absolutely.